I'm starting to think that somehow Hitler was connected to Lucius the Eternal, as after defeating the German excesses mid-last century, the United Kingdom has somehow transformed into the 2025 equivalent of Nazi Germany, becoming the hub of all censorship and every single terrible idea intended to curb the internet, freedom of expression, and today, pornography. The canary down the coal mine, with UK pornography task force to propose banning barely legal content after Channel 4 documentary airs. Which, since I recently did a video talking about the occasional pains of committing to one's principles, means that I now have to speak the words in defense of barely legal pornography and Bonnie Blue. Somehow, this is slightly worse than the racial fetish porn mods for Stellar Blade. I mean, at least that was just a mod, something you had to seek out quite specifically to find, and the consequences of it being removed would have been relatively minor, just one more rock hurtling down the side of the mountain, eventually picking up speed and size until it becomes a boulder, whereas this is the government going, yeah, I mean, it's legal, but we've decided we don't like it, and so we're gonna make the legal illegal, whilst presumably still making it technically legal. But hey, when has something being legal or illegal ever stopped a politician from abusing one's power? Never, that's why. So, to kind of expand upon this a little bit, so this obviously came from one of Bonnie Blue's stunts, a woman famous for sleeping with barely legal young men. But again, the key point here is barely legal, as in legal, because when it comes to things like sexuality, where we have to take into consideration the mental state of the people in question, when a man or a woman is capable of making informed decisions about consent, yada 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 yada, we will eventually simply just have to draw an arbitrary line and go anything under this, no, anything over this, okay. And people will then go, okay, well, anything over that line is good, right? It's legal. And yeah, technically, but it can still, of course, be distasteful. So let me drag your ass back to the early years of the internet for a moment here to understand how we've come to this place, okay? To understand how we've arrived not only in a situation where on the one hand, the UK is planning to ban barely legal content, but at the same hand, you also have literally people having countdown timers for little Tay turning 18 so she can get on OnlyFans, because it is a wild little ride. So, going all the way back to the early days of the internet, it was virtually unrecognizable from today, completely so. It was the wild, wild west. Anything and everything went. Virtually anything was allowed. Which means that the ever-popular practice of trolling, trying to piss people off deliberately on the internet, which was a huge part of early internet culture, was kind of difficult. You either had to act like a complete idiot who didn't understand that something was wrong, going, oh yes, the blasters in Star Trek would really, really own those Space Marines, or something like that, or you would need to come up with something proper offensive that might get people clutching their pearls. But in an era of complete freedom, that was hard. And so enter Pedo Bear. Forewarning, if you haven't gathered it already, we are indeed going to talk about some unsavory topics today. So, Pedo Bear was literally a 4chan meme trying to go, hey, pedos, wink wink, does this piss you off? That was how extreme people had to get. And it sort of did for a little bit. It became a symbol of edgy humor, of like, oh hey, look at how people clutch their pearls over this stupid bear. And Then people started clutching their pearls and got upset with Pedo Bear, which began a long descent of various degrees of censorship of distasteful things. Pedo Bear was one extreme of this is how much it takes to piss people off, and then people started to get pissed off. The next step up, which was something he was acquainted with, was the term of jailbait. So, Wikipedia is a slang for a person who is younger than legal age of consensual sexual activity and usually appears older. Now, there was a whole host of memes surrounding this as well, as it was an attempt again to piss people off and have them clutch their pearls. However, I tried to find some, but they've literally been Cheetoed off the internet. I put my browser at significant risk to try and represent this, and, well, this is as good a proof of my point as anything. The only thing I could find that is vaguely referential is this Ahsoka Tano meme. Again, it's just been completely wiped off the net. And I'll point out, this used to be on Reddit, okay? There was an jailbait, and hell, I found this wonderful article of a banned subreddit, and Jesus, it is a list. Everything from the jailbait to incels to some special ones, deep fakes. What was it? What was the one that was a massive controversy at the time? Fat people hate. That was the one. So fat people hate was literally just like a Reddit where you hated on fat people and mocked them. And it was all in good humor and or antagonism, again, to try and piss people off. It was closed in 2015. Even Boogie, at the time thought to be a fairly good person and one of significant weight, came out in defense of the Reddit, as again, I stress here, the point of most of this was to annoy people. Although in the case of this, yeah, there was definitely a sexual element to it as well, although, amusingly enough, at the time when all of this was getting banned, I thought of making a video on it, because I was like, okay, I see where this is going, but at the same time, I was like, okay, I'm not making a video on this topic, because it's going to make people say, check his fucking hard drive. And I understand. But now that it's all come true, well, here we are, aren't we? So, the amusing thing here then is that we have now eventually arrived, because we started with, okay, Pedo Bear, not okay, don't glorify pedophilia. Alright, fair enough. To jailbait, okay, don't sexualize underage kids. Again, fair enough. To barely legal? Should it be legal? And it seems ridiculous that these 2 points are connected, and yet they unquestionably are, because you have to begin in one end. That is how any purity spiral begins. You start with something that you can get a lot of support for, because most people will genuinely find it actually distasteful. Then you get that banned. But you aren't doing this for any good reasons. You weren't doing it because you were genuinely worried, You were doing it because it would give you attention. And as you got that attention, well, you started feeling just what the trolls did. As, again, people were trying to piss people off on the internet before there was any actual point in it. The internet back then wasn't monetized in the same way that it is now. People were doing it just for attention. Purity spiral is the same thing. But when you've come up with a problem, you can't offer a perfect solution, because if you do, your movement is pointless. You can't monetize it, you can't use it for attention anymore. And so you've got to find the next problem, until eventually we get here. Again, it seems tortuous, and yet here we of course are. As the article again, it doesn't make any attempts to defend why this is going to happen. It is essentially putting forth things like, oh, she was shooting with people who look barely legal, who looked very young. Isn't this heinous? Isn't this despicable? And, well, I mean, yeah, but we have now reached the point of it is actually legal, which leads us to another amusing fuzzy barrier that we are seeing today. I'm sure many of you have heard the term naked yoga. Now, I can't show it to you because it would get me banned, but there is a whole brand of thing on YouTube, naked yoga, where women will paint themselves and take films of themselves butt-ass naked, stretching and doing yoga poses for obvious reasons. However, this is not banned on YouTube. Why? Because it is a creative pursuit. So, on the one hand, if you show too much cleavage whilst whispering into the microphone on an ASMR channel, you're going to get Cheetoed off the internet. You can also paint yourself and strut around butt-ass naked on the very self-same platform. Huh. Strange. At the same time, whilst we will also scrub the entirety of jailbait off the internet, again, I did research on this when it happened, and you know where all of the people who were visiting those jailbait sites went? Turns out there are entire websites dedicated to uploading footage from nudist beaches. Yeah. Which, incidentally, is also entirely legal due to cultural nonsense. I don't even fucking know. And so we are now in a situation where our legal system has become remarkably fuzzy and indistinct, where the legal system, the law, the rules are ironclad and yet also simultaneously completely and utterly porous, to the point where we can't really determine what the rules are anymore, other than observing the exceptions to the rules and whether or not someone is punished for violating the rules. This is another one of those sham democracy things, where we're beginning to reach the end stages of something that looks an awful lot like the initial stages of a tyrannical state, where the legal apparatus, in the case of YouTube, social media, so like the everything that surrounds you, to the actual legal arm of government, becomes hazy and indistinct, punishing not for legality reasons, as again, barely legal remains legal, but because it is found to be inopportune, undesirable. As they're talking in this article about how it is the communists pushing at the boundaries will be trying to address the barely legal aspect legislatively. It's like pushing at the boundaries. It's not. By definition, it's not. But you're pissed off by the barely part, and you've run out of anything else to ban, and so here we are. We no longer know what the rules are, and if you think you know what the rules are, well, you're simply a week or a month or a year away from a payment processor deciding that those aren't the rules anymore, on the urging of 12 crazy feminists in Australia, ruining the internet for everyone. Or you're a month away from some government stooge going, well, I saw a show on the television that annoyed me, and changing the rule set yet again. To even social media, which luckily is being more affected by the general pushback of the public at large, going, well, these are the rules, except in a series of specific circumstances. At least, this is why people are looking at the UK and comparing it to China and going, actually, the Chinese are better off. Because whilst that is an actual tyrannical dictatorship where the party determines what the rules are, at least the party is clear about what the rules are. Don't critique the government. Don't dismiss or diss the glorious leader in any way. Everyone knows the rules. Whereas here in the West, if you think you know the rules, just give it a couple of months and you'll be proven incorrect. So, yeah. Again, the point remains from the Queen of Spades video, where having the principle against anti-censorship has been proven to be something that is in near absolute position, where even if you find something distasteful, so long as it is legal, it must be defended and accepted. Because if it is not defended and accepted, then over the course of, in this case, it took 15 years, but it nevertheless happened, eventually you will arrive at this position. I half wish I'd made that video 10 years ago now, because whilst it would have gotten me into a fuck ton of hot water at the time, at least then I could have held it up and go, see? Fucking told you so. Until next time, I've been Arch. Thank you very much for watching, and I do hope to see you all again soon. Have a good day.